Ellis. Now we're going to have Jim Smith. Actually, if you look at this whole thing, the way we're doing it, Jim Ellis talked about the nomenclature of the drum. Jim Smith is going to talk about the sound of the drum. And then later, Jim Clark's going to talk about the historical perspective. So one just kind of ties into the other. So Jim, you got about 5 more minutes on what we originally opted for, so you're on.
Okay.
All right.
Well, my name is Jim Smith, and I'm an old-fashioned sheepskin fiddler. And I've got a couple things that I'm going to try to do here tonight. One is to introduce one of the world's finest piano players. And you're going to enjoy his comments about drums in Connecticut and drum corps in Connecticut in just a little bit. But as Jimmy Ellis just said, so in his wonderful presentation and introduction on rope drums, oh shoot, I forgot. I'm also supposed to help recruit some drummers for the C.A. Palmer Fife and Drum Corps in Palmyra, New York, which is in western New York, close to Rochester. The Corps started in 1961 and is on its 50th year, and it's seen better days. In 1976, the Corps had 76 players who went to Deep River for the muster. Right now, it's got a handful of fifers and but we also have, I think it's 6 drums, just like the one Jimmy took apart there, snare drums, field drums. I think there's 3 bass drums that match, along with, and they're like new. They've been played hard, put away, well, they haven't been put away wet, but they've been played hard. They've been to England and back, and we did a kickoff last year, and we're doing the 50th anniversary this year because it was 50 years ago that we first made an appearance in Deep River. And we'll have some veterans to go back and do that, and we're starting a junior corps. But anyhow, I'm looking for drummers, and if you're from western New York and that area and would like to get back into this or get into it, love to talk with you. This here is an antique junker. It was used during the Civil War. It was made in 1861 by the Zimmerman folks in Philadelphia. I know it was used hard and put away wet because when I got it, a little over 20 years ago, it was a relic. And as Jim just described, it wasn't entirely in pieces, but enough of the original pieces were there. The counter hoops were there, the flesh hoops were there, and most of the original heads were there, along with the ears. And I've never seen ears that were tied like this before with things laying loose. But that's the way it was, and that's the way I restored it. The original decoration, I mean, these things were made as consumables, just like the weapons. If they lasted for, I mean, it's made for the U.S. government to the lowest responsive bidder. And if it lasted for a couple of years, it had fulfilled its mission. So to have something that's still playable after over 100 years is pretty neat. So anyhow, I put it back together the way it was. And I've been playing it on the Civil War reenactments with the Federal City Brass Band, with different drum and fife corps and things like that for years. And I've got a handful of other drums and stuff, as Jim knows. And I love that old, when we started the C.A. Palmer Corps, the only drums we could find, the only rope drums, were coming out of people's barns and attics. They were Civil War period drums. And we did what Buck Soisman said: okay, you take an old knife, cut the ropes off, throw away the ears, throw away the beat up hoops, and make them playable. And of course you have to put a rag in. Well, the next set of drums that I found for the Corps were U.S. Army contract drums made by Ludwig, Slingerland, Gretsch, and folks starting in the First World War and up through the Second World War. Rope drums And long story, but I found him in an old music store in Rochester in 1961. And we hauled him out, and gee, I noticed there were no rags in them. So dutifully, I went ahead and put a muffle rag in all those drums. We had 20 of them. Now they're still floating around somewhere, but you know, like everything else, that's what happened. So anyhow, I've done enough talking for right now. What I want to do, when Jim was talking about sound, he said, you know, what is the sound that you want to get, want to hear? And for a while, I keep finding that there are more and more people who are coming into the ancient world. We saw it, of course, in the 1960s, when 50s, when New Yorkers moved up to Connecticut and said, oh man, this is great, and they brought a different style and change. And so there's been a lot of changes taking place. And as more and more people come into this from burning out or getting tired of DCA, DCI, and my grandfather started the Drum and Bugle Corps in the 1930s, and that's where I started as a kid in the 50s. But then I heard the fifes and drums, and it was like
Which corps was that by name? Which corps was that?
Frederick Fennell. Fennell, Eastman. And I called him up and I said, what are those drummers doing? I couldn't figure it out. He said, well, come up and visit. And so he made some connections for me, and I started taking some real lessons. I had to undo everything that I'd ever been doing. But, you know, that's what it is. I want to just talk a minute about sound and how you manufacture the sound, and how the drum actually sounded on the field of battle. Because this is what these things were for. They were for use on the field of battle. That's why there were drummers assigned. There were 2 drummers, 2 musicians assigned to each company of infantry, 60 to 100 men. You had 2 drummers. Their purpose was to, I'll read something for you in a minute if you don't believe me, but their purpose was to help instill unity in the way that men move, and that feeling of esprit de corps, and that the ability to level your piece and fire a volley and show discipline on the field. Lots of times you could win the day by having the discipline. It's like playing football. You know, that's the way they did things. You had 2 sides that lined up against each other, and see who could shoot and how many men were standing on either side. Well, if you had discipline to lay down a volley that was effective, you could take the day, and that was the way. If you had, and it started with the bowman, long bow, crossbow, pipe, the same signals, the same idea was what they did. I meant to just talk about sound for a second. If you'll just bear with me, I need to set my mind straight, and I think you'll recognize this. Who can forget Vince Batista leading the carry-on, the caisson, with John Kennedy's funeral procession. So this is just an old drum. This is the sound. But now, and that was part of the duty. That was part of the job of the drummers, part of the funeral duty. Oh, I wanted to, sorry. I didn't mean to.
Hold still, Jim. Hold still.
Hold
Still. Motion picture, isn't it?
I guess so.
Have I got a minute yet, Bill?
Yeah, about 5.
Okay. I need my spectacles for a minute here. This is from an orderly book maintained by First Lieutenant Samuel Smith, 1749 to 1836. He was in, let's see, General Anthony Wayne's command. And this was an orderly book that he, like a daily journal. And he'd made an entry here on June 21st, 1776. Now there's 2 pages in this orderly book about what I'm about to say. And it says this: in order that the soldiers may be acquainted with the sound of the drum, and be at no loss to understand the meaning of each beat, the general appoints the following signals on the drums throughout the whole army. This. Well, I thought this was pretty neat. And it says, turn or face to the right, a single stroke, and a flam. Doesn't give musical notation, but it's rote. Turn or face to the left, 2 single strokes and a flam. To the left about, to the wheel about, to front, to make ready. We were just talking about laying down a field of fire, a volley. All right, let's do that. And if you don't mind, I'll just brace this a little bit. Now, this is one of those drums that Jimmy was talking about that never had a snare strainer. It's just got 4 loose gut snares on it, just the way the original. I've tied it back up with a leather butt, just the way the original was. And let's see here. Like Jim was saying, a little bit at a time around each side. I'll pull the snares just a little bit here. And I've got a stick. That's as fancy as it gets. Just a stick to put in there. All right. How many? Is there anybody in here who's trainable? No. I need a show of hands. Who's trainable? There's got to be somebody in this room who's trainable.
Incorrigible.
Incorrigible. Okay, anybody who's incorrigible. Need to see a show of hands. Trainable. Jimmy, I need your hand. Okay. Well, this is what I do lots of times in some of the shows that I've been doing. One of my other drums is, again, a Civil War drum that this fellow from Pittsburgh carried, and I do things at school. But what I have the kids do is give me a show of hands. I want them to put one hand up. Okay, now when you hear this, put the other hand up. This is the same thing the fellows were doing with their muskets. This is when I just said the preparative. This was the signal that when the colonel said to the drummer, beat the preparative, or beat up the preparative. That's the signal to reach into your cartridge box, pull a cartridge, break off the end, pour some powder in the frizzen, seal it, pour it down the barrel, stuff your ball in, ram it home. Come to the ready. All right? The next thing, we've got people with their hands up in the air. This is the firing stroke. That's the key for all the militiamen to lay down a field of fire. So two things there. Demonstrated this. What we know today is the lesson 25 or the rat-a-tat, which hundreds of years ago was the preparative. And the use of the preparative and the use of jammed flams as part of the signal to fire. And this was part of the drill. This was the reason for having the drummers on the field. Heavy on the left. Keep everybody together. Keep the arms swinging. Get everybody moving as one. And thank you very much, Bill. Have I exhausted the limits of everyone's patience? Thank you.